All right, welcome to Daily Power Parsha. All right, today is Wednesday, July 27th, and we are here to study Torah. Torah portion this week, we have a double portion, Matot-Masei or Matos-Masei. And today, of course, being Wednesday, so always the Wednesday of a double portion is when we finish off the first of the two and start the second of the two Torah portions. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So as we left off yesterday, we were in a pretty dramatic experience dramatic episode where the tribes of Reuven and Gad came to Moses and said to Moses, hey, we'd like to settle here. We don't want to go any further. We don't want to go into the land of Israel. We don't want to take a portion of that land. We like this land right here. We have a lot of cattle. This land is absolutely fantastic for cattle. So let's just settle right here. And Moses immediately gets triggered, if that's the correct term. You know, far be it from me to assume anything with Moses, but nonetheless, it seems like he gets triggered. And he says, number one, he says, you're going to stay here and settle while your brothers go into war, go into battle. They're going to fight and you're not going to fight. It's not right. It's not fair. Number one. Number two, by you not going into the land, by you not joining the war effort, that's going to discourage everyone else. And everyone will say, well, hold on, wait a second. If they're afraid to fight, then maybe this fight is not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't go into the land. And then it's going to cause a disheartening of the entire nation. And then Moses says the third point is this story played out exactly the same way 40 years prior, where your ancestors, where your parents, with the sin of the spies, where they came back and gave a negative report, the people became disillusioned, and ultimately it caused wandering for 40 years. This is happening again. Moses says this is an absolute disaster. How could you do this? And so they reply after Moses kind of lays into them. And they say to Moses, it was not our intention. It was not at all our intention to dishearten anybody or to not even, pull our own weight. On the contrary, we're ready to go. We're ready to fight. Here's what we want to do. We want to leave our family, our children and our wives. We want to leave them here. They said the order, we'll build pens for our animals and houses for our kids. We'll create the safety and security that they need. And then we'll go ahead together with the other tribes. The men will go ahead. The soldiers will go with the other tribes and fight the battles. We'll be on the front lines. And then after everyone is settled, all the battles have been fought and won, we'll go back home to our families. Okay. So that was the explanation of the offer. Now the commentaries actually get into this question. Was that the initial intention of Reuven and Gad? Or once they heard Moses' pushback, did they say kind of, whoops, okay, well, let's modify our ask? It's not clear. I'd like to think that they had this in mind from the beginning, and Moses kind of just misread them. But either way, that is how they clarify their position. All right, let me share my screen. Let's jump into reading number 4 for Wednesday. So Numbers chapter 32, verse 20. So Moses said to them, this is after they qualified their request. Moses said to them, if you do this thing, in other words, if you arm yourselves for battle before the Lord, and your armed forces crosses the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies before him. So in other words, if you are willing to go in battle indeed, and you go in to face the enemy, and the land will be conquered before the Lord. So assuming all goes well and you participate in that, then afterwards you may return, and you shall be freed of your obligation from the Lord and from Israel. And this land meaning this land on the other side, on the eastern side of the Jordan, the land outside of Israel, this land that you request will become your heritage before the Lord. Basically, I will have agreed to your request. Yeah, Sarah.
Freed of your obligation from the Lord and from Israel.
Oh, you're saying, what does that mean? Yeah, my understanding is, and we'll wait we'll hold off all final remarks until we read Rashi. But my understanding would be that you are free from your obligation to be part of it. In other words, because you have been part of it, because you're going to go to fight, then you'll be freed from the overarching obligation that everybody's supposed to go in. So, no one will, no longer will there be a claim against you. So if you go into battle, you're at the head of the battle with your brothers, then that's it. There's no more obligation. Nothing is going to be held against you or over your head. That's it. You're good to go. I think that's the way I'm understanding it. But that being said, let's toggle Rashi. And Rashi does not comment. Freed of your obligation, Rashi does not comment. However, give me a quick second, because I can pull commentaries. One advantage of having my books nearby is that I have the Makrot Gedolot. We can see if there's any other commentaries that appear on the page. All right, we have about Pinchas, Matos. All right, let's see what we got here. It's interesting, when Rashi doesn't comment, it usually means that Rashi believes that the student will understand it on their own, or based on a comment that he has already given. So let's see. You see Nikiim. See if we have any commentaries here that I can find. The Hiyisem Nikiim, you will be free. I do not see anything right here on the page. Nope. Okay. So I guess we'll go with I don't know if it's simple. We'll go with the basic understanding that it means freed from any further obligation. In other words, it will no longer be said, or it cannot be said about you that, oh, you didn't want to go into Israel, or you didn't do the right thing. That's it. That's all what you need to do is, as you yourselves have offered, is to fight along your brethren. Don't jump out of the war, pull out of the war effort early. But assuming that you're there until the end, until everything has been conquered, until the dust is settled, then at that point you are under no additional obligation. Okay, and this land meaning the land that you requested outside of Israel, that will become your heritage before the Lord. However, verse 23, but if you do not do so, if you don't go into war or into the battles, or if you start, but then you're like, I don't need this. We have a place back, on the other side of the river. If you don't fulfill your obligation, behold, you will have sinned against the Lord, and be aware of your sin, which will find you. Wow, look at that. Be aware of your sin, which will find you. And that is a not so veiled threat, essentially saying that this will come back to you. Don't think that you can run away from this. This is not going to be something that you can run away. This will find you if you don't fulfill your obligation. So he says in conclusion, Moses says to the two tribes, Reuben and Gad, build yourselves cities for your children. And here's what Rashi mentioned yesterday, where he corrects their priorities. So build yourself cities for your children, for your families, and secondarily enclosures for your sheep, right? Build places for your life, for your animals, and what has proceeded from your mouth you shall do. You must keep what you yourselves have offered to do. All right, verse 25, and here we get confirmation. The descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuven spoke to Moses, saying, your servants will do as my master commands. Yes, you got a deal. Our children and our wives, our livestock and our cattle, here they prioritize it correctly. They will remain there in the cities of Gilead, i.e. in the Transjordan, on the eastern side outside of Israel, on the eastern border, outside the eastern border. But your servants, the men of military age, will cross over, and who are the ones that will do that? All who are armed for combat. In other words, those that are eligible for the army before the Lord for the battle, as my master has spoken. So and it's going back and forth a bunch of times. They ask for the land. Moses pushes back. They qualify their offer. Moses says, okay, if you do this, then fine. And they say, yes, we will do this. And they specify exactly what they will do. At this point, Moses is bringing in those that can hold them accountable. Because remember, Moses is going to pass away before they enter the land of Israel, before any of these battles unfold. So therefore, Moses brings in the next leaders, the next generation leaders. Moses commanded Elazar, the Kohen, and Joshua, the son of Nun, right? So initially it was Moses and Aaron. Aaron passed away, Elazar, his son, took over. Moses will pass away soon, and Joshua will take over. So Elazar and Joshua, the next generation leaders. So he commanded them, and he also brought in on this all the paternal heads of the tribes of the children of Israel concerning them. Basically, he said, this is the deal that we're making with these two tribes. Everyone needs to know about it. It's completely transparent, and hold them accountable for it. Moses said to them, Elazar, Joshua, and the heads of the tribes, if the descendants of Gad and Reuben cross the Jordan with you armed for battle before the Lord, if they keep their end of the deal, and they go with you across the Jordan with arms, etc., and the land is conquered before you, then you shall get, in other words, and they see it through to its culmination, then and only then you shall give them the land of Gilead as a heritage. Remember, Gilead was this Transjordan land. But if they do not cross over with you armed for battle, in other words, if they renege on their promise, then they shall receive a possession among you in the land of Canaan. Then they lose this land. They will not get this land. They should not get this land. Rather, they should only, like the original plan, they should go into Israel and receive that land. Now, I mean, if they don't go for battle, then I mean, what's the punishment? They get a piece of the land of Israel. All punishment should be that bad. But nonetheless, the point is that if they break their end of the deal, then they're not going to get this land. The descendants of God. So Moses basically creates this contract. Everyone knows about it. The leadership knows, the future leadership knows about it. Everyone's aware of it. And so the descendants of God and the descendants of Reuben answered, saying, we shall do as the Lord has spoken to your servants. And again, this has gone back and forth now already. I don't know. It feels like a dozen times, right? But it's, once again, they say, yes, we will do this. And then they specify, as we know, we shall cross over in an armed force before the Lord to the land of Canaan. And then after that, we shall have the possession of our inheritance on this side of the Jordan. Wow. So after all that dialogue and clarification, and all the contracts are signed and the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, then Moses gave the descendants of God and the descendants of Reuben, and he brings in a third element. And half the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, he brought in Manasseh. We'll talk about why soon, because originally only God and Reuben had asked for it, for the Transjordan land. Now he also brings in half of Manasseh, okay? And he gave to them, what did he give to them? The kingdom of Sichon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land together with its cities, within borders, the cities of the surrounding territory. So he gave them that land. And remember, Sichon and Og, those are the two kings and nations. Sichon, the king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. Those are the ones that went to war, provoked war against the Jewish people. The Jewish people defeated them. At this point, they had the land. So Moses says, all right, we're going to formalize it. This land officially belongs to God, Reuben, and half Manasseh, and that's it. Which lands, which territories, specifically which cities, the descendants of, So those are the territories. Then the Torah tells us the cities that they built. The descendants of God built Divon and Natarot and Aroer, and Atra. I'm looking at the Hebrew. Atrot, Shofan, and Yazer, and Yogbaha, and Beit Nimrah, and Beit Haran, fortified cities and sheepfolds. So that's what God built. Those are the cities that God built. What about Reuven? The descendants of Reuben built Cheshbon and El Oleh and Kiryasayim and Nevo or Nebo and Baal Maon, their names having been changed. Okay, and Sibma. And they were called with names of the cities. They were called with names of the cities they built. So that's Gad and Reuven. And what about half of Manasseh? The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, went to Gilead and conquered it, driving out the Amorites who were there. So apparently there was still one piece that was still occupied by Amorites. Well, they went in and drove away the Amorites. Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he settled in it. Yair, the son of Manasseh, remember Manasseh had multiple sons. Machir was given Gilead. And what about Yair? Yair, son of Manasseh, went and conquered their hamlets and called them the hamlets of Yair. What a beautiful name. Chavot Yair, the hamlets of Yair. Novach went and conquered Kenat and its surrounding villages and called it Nobach after his name. He named it for himself. So Manasseh's three sons, Machir, Yair, and Novach, that was half of Manasseh, those three families, and they each took some territories in that Transjordan land. So here the Torah specifies exactly what God got, exactly what Reuben got, and exactly what Manasseh got with these three elements, these three families within Manasseh. I believe Manasseh had a total of 6 families that inherited the land, so 3 and 3. All right. That's how the first Torah portion ends. That's how Matot ends. We're going to start Masei soon, but first Rashi, right? We're going to start there in a moment, but first, let's go back. Let's see Rashi. Rashi, for your sheep. Okay, that we have a grammatical Rashi. We're going to skip that. And what has proceeded from your mouth you shall do, Rashi. That's what Moses tells the tribes. For the sake of the Most High God, make sure you do this. For you have undertaken to cross over for battle until the completion of conquest and the apportionment of the land. Now, just to be very clear, we know historically it took them 7 years to fight the battles. Once they stepped foot in Israel, once they crossed the Jordan, 7 years in battle and another 7 years to settle all the lands, and divide and settle. 7 and 7, 14 years. So Moses reiterates that the deal is, he's clarifying, the deal is that you're not going to go back until the 14 years, all 14 years have passed. 7 of conquering, 7 of settling. That's an important clarification. Because Moses had asked of them only and will be conquered before the Lord after you may return. In other words, Moses says you have to at least go into Israel and fight until the 7 years of battle have been completed. But they upped the offer themselves. They said until the other tribes has taken possession, they changed it. Moses says, I was only asking for you to fight the battles. But you said you're not going to go back to these lands until everyone else has taken possession. Okay. Thus, they themselves added that they would remain 7 years while it was divided. And indeed, they did so. And Joshua 22 clarifies that was the case. They 7 years, they were engaged in battle together with their brothers. And then for the next 7 years, they remained in Israel until all the other tribes settled the land. And then they went home. They helped in whatever way they could for all 14 years. Okay, the sense of God spoke, Vayomer is said in the singular form, indicating that they all spoke as one person. In other words, they all were on one page. Commanded concerning them, lahem, like aleim, concerning them, concerning the fulfillment of their condition. He appointed Elazar and Joshua, as in the Lord will fight for you. Basically, Elazar and Joshua were appointed as the enforcers of this contract. Okay, and then we shall have possession of our inheritance, Rashi. That is to say, the possession of our inheritance on this side of the Jordan will be in our hands and under our ownership, assuming that we fulfill our conditions. Okay, They built fortified cities. The sense of God built all these cities, fortified cities and sheepfolds. Rashi. This last part of the verse relates to the beginning of the passage, the sense of God built these cities as fortified cities and sheepfolds. In other words, it wasn't only that these two cities were fortified. No, all the cities, all the Divon, Atarot, Arar, all these were fortified, and they had places for the sheep. Remember, fortified cities is important when all your soldiers, all your defenders are overseas. Okay, maybe not overseas, across the river in the land of Israel, fighting other battles. So now you're leaving behind a relatively vulnerable population, an unarmed, untrained population. So that seems like a very bad idea, which is why, of course, they built the fortified cities. And for their animals, they built the sheepfolds. Let's continue. Nevo, Ba'ma'on, and then the Torah says their names having been changed. What does that mean? Rashi. Nevo and Ba'ma'on were names of pagan deities. Look at that. Look at that. They were named after idols. Gods, pagan gods. And the Amorites named their towns after their deities. And the descendants of Reuben changed their names to other names. This is the meaning of their names having been changed. Nevo and Ba'ma'on changed to another name. Okay, well, there you go. So Nevo and Ba'ma'on, their names haven't been changed. It means originally they were called Nevo and Ba'ma'on, but ultimately those were named after idolatry, after pagan deities. So they changed the name. What was the other name? I don't know. Torah doesn't say it. And Sibma, they built Sibma, which is identical with Sabam, mentioned earlier in verse 3. Okay. Children of Machir, son of Menashe, went to Gilead Karka, driving out the Amorites, Rashi, driving out, as the Targum Onkelos renders it, and drove out the word. Okay, then grammatical continues. And I'm still going to mention, don't worry, I didn't forget. I'm going to clarify why Menashe was brought in when they did half of Menashe when they didn't even ask for it. All right, their hamlets, Chavotehem, yeah, they're hamlets. Call them hamlets of Yair, since he had no children. Since Yair, son of Menashe, did not have any children, he named them after himself as a memorial. He named his own memorial to live in his legacy. They called it Nobach. Okay. Since the name did not remain permanently, it is a silent letter. Okay, I don't know. Well, we'll leave that aside. But a clarification, remember, Gad and Reuven, those two tribes came to Moses for the request. And when Moses grants the request, he brings in Menashe, half of Menashe. And the question is, who asked for that? And if Moses did that unilaterally, why? That's the big question. The big question is why. So here is one answer that I love given by the commentaries. Menashe, right, half of Menashe. Menashe was one of the sons of Joseph. In fact, the eldest, the firstborn son of Joseph was Menashe. Menashe, and then Ephraim. And then, of course, we know that Ephraim's ultimate legacy was going to be greater than Menashe, which is why Jacob, their grandfather, crossed his hands when blessing them. Be that as it may, Menashe was the son of Joseph, the firstborn son of Joseph. Who is Joseph? Rashi has told this to us before. Joseph is someone who loved the land of Israel. How do we know this? Because before his passing, he said, I'm going to die. Make sure when you leave Egypt, make sure to take my bones with me. Bury me in the Holy Land, in the Promised Land. He loved Israel. There's another way that we know this. When Joseph was seduced by Potiphar's wife, right? He worked for Potiphar, and then Potiphar's wife liked Joseph, and so she tried to seduce him, and then he wanted to, and then he didn't want to. He ran away, and she had his garment and whatever it was. So then she tells her husband, She tells her husband the following. She said, this Hebrew slave that you brought home, he attacked me. He assaulted me. She calls him the Hebrew slave. What's Hebrew? Ivri. Hebrew comes from the Hebrew word ivri, from the word ivri. Ivri means the other side of the river. So basically, and that's not the Jordan River. That's probably whatever river is over there. The point. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They're called Ivri. I don't know. It somehow Ivri reflects the idea. Hebrew reflects the idea that Joseph came from the land of Canaan, from the land that would become Israel. Point is that Joseph wore his origins, his nationality, as it were, on his sleeve. So that when she wanted to accuse him of assault, she tells her husband, this Hebrew man came and assaulted him. This Hebrew slave came and assaulted him. Joseph was into Israel. It was on his face. Everyone knew him as someone who came from that part of the world, that land. When he died, he said to his family, make sure you take my remains out of here to the land of Israel. So Moses knows that Joseph loves Israel. Manasseh, his firstborn son, certainly loved Israel. And the tribe itself loves Israel. So he thought to himself like this. I'm making a deal. It's a risky deal. Because Moses is going to pass away before the deal, is able to be applied. So it's a bit of a risky deal. What's the risk? The risk is that these two tribes say, see you later. We're not doing it. We're just settling here. We're not going to go fight any battles. We're just going to totally duck out of our obligation. So Moses wants to put a little bit of an insurance policy on this. So he chooses as an extra a party in this, basically like a guarantor on a loan. Like, sure, you can sign on it, but I'd really like that guy to sign on it because I trust that guy. Moses says, I trust Manasseh because he's from Joseph. Joseph loves Israel. There's not going to be any shenanigans. If we bring Manasseh in on this deal, then they're definitely going to fight together. They're definitely going to make sure that all you guys fight with the rest of the tribes to conquer the land of Israel and to settle it and then come back here. Half of Manasseh is the ultimate insurance policy and the guarantor that this deal will be fulfilled properly. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let's jump back in. Let's continue with the second half of the reading.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
So to clarify, I found something in my Chumash, it's Yoma 38a, about that then you shall have satisfied your commitment. That I was
nice.
Yeah, it's what you've told us before. But it's this conveys a moral lesson. It's not enough to know that one's actions are proper in God's eyes. One must also act in such a way as not to engender suspicion on the part of human beings.
Oh, I love that.
You've told us.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. That's really good. That is really good. No, it's funny because I did see there was a Talmudic passage that was quoted, but I didn't see that. I didn't see it there. I see Psachim 13. What was it, Yoma? Which page?
38a.
Oh, okay.
My question came from let me go back to this on the internet. And you shall be freed of your obligation from the Lord and from Israel. Right. But this is just, then you shall have satisfied your commitment. Is it V'yisem Nikim?
Yeah, V'yisem Nikim, yeah. What's so interesting is, I do see it is actually here. It says, V'al davar zeh maskir nes l'shvach. Okay, basically the Talmud in Yoma 38, because the Yoma, the tractate Yoma is about Yom Kippur. Yoma is like the day. Which day? The day of Yom Kippur. That's the tractate all about the Yom Kippur. So it talks about on 38.8, apparently, it talks about the ketores, the incense. And it says that there was a family, here, I'm going to read this. Beis Garmu, the house of Garmu. It's like the house of Prada, whatever. Like that was the name. Oh, sorry. They were experts in the showbread and how to make it. And this is why they're praiseworthy. There was never, their kids never walked around with bread, with clean bread. So that no one should ever say that, the bakers of the showbread for the temple giving their kids from the showbread, right? They're kind of siphoning off from the side. L'kayim mashenember, to fulfill what stated, and be free, be pure in the eyes of Hashem and from Israel. Beis Avtinos, the house of Avtinos, how he became my secretaries. They were experts in making the incense, and that's what I started saying. And this is why they're praised. No bride from that family ever went out with perfume. And when the sons of that family would marry a girl from another family, they would mastan ima. They would make a condition with the wife to be, with the potential bride, shaloi tispasem, that she should not wear perfume. So that no one should ever say that they're using the formula of the incense for their own personal perfume. So basically, this is about being above board. I guess it's derived from this verse. Now, are they being above board here, or are they just fulfilling their obligation? I don't know, but yeah, that is the associated Talmudic passage. I think the simple meaning, though, is probably still kind of what, be free from your obligation and whatever. But I think it means, Shaya. Want to say hi? You don't have to. Shai and Shalom came back from camp. There you go. All right, awesome. Hey, Ali. Oh, wow. We got everybody here. Not everybody. 2 out of 4. There's everybody else over there. All right. You're hungry? Go grab food. Okay, soon. All right. Okay. All right, let's go back inside. All right, so now let's start. I also think along those lines, I'm now recalling, and thank you for mentioning that, because you got me thinking about a few you can have it. There is I think there's an essay from Jonathan Sachs, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, about this, about the just playing off of this passage and the Talmud, about how important it is to do things in such a way that intentionally do not evoke suspicion in the eyes of anyone, because that would be essentially setting them up to suspect you, which would put them, in a negative place. We shouldn't be suspecting other people, nor should we be doing things that are suspicious that then evoke suspicion, because then we're putting a stumbling block in front of the blind. So it's about us, it's about everyone. What's the word I'm looking for? Like thinking through, and that's not the word. Whatever. It's anticipating. It's anticipating what might evoke what might evoke suspicion in someone else's mind, and then not doing that, just so that we're totally above board. All right, let's go back inside and let's go to, let's toggle Rashi off and jump into Masei. All right, Ela Masei, Numbers chapter 33. These are the journeys of the children of Israel who left the land of Egypt in their legions under the charge of Moses and Aaron. So now the Torah, the last Torah portion of the book of Bamidbar, is going to talk about the journeys. All of the stops along the way. It makes sense because we're at the border of Israel right now. We're knocking on the door. And so the Torah is now going to trace the journey from Egypt to the border of Israel over the 40 years. Here we go. Moses recorded their starting points for their journeys according to the word of the Lord. So it's not like they just traveled aimlessly, but he recorded the starting points. He recorded the cities or the places. And these were the journeys with their starting points, and now we're going to list them. They journeyed from Ramses. That was, of course, in Egypt. In the first month, in the 15th day of the first month, that's the 15th day of Nisan, on the day following the Passover sacrifice. Remember, the Passover sacrifice is done Erev Pesach on the 14th. So the first day of Passover, which would be the 15th of the month of Nisan, is when they made that first journey. The children of Israel left triumphantly before the eyes of all the Egyptians. In the Hebrew, it's not triumphantly, it's biyad rama, which means with an elevated arm or an elevated hand. What does that mean? I guess triumphantly. It's like an awkward expression in the Hebrew to translate literally. And the Egyptians were busy burying their dead because the Lord had struck down their firstborn and had wrought vengeance against their deities. So the Egyptians were all busy while the Jews were journeying. That was journey number one. The children of Israel journeyed from Ramses, and camped in Sukkot. That was the first journey out of Egypt. Yeah. Okay. I want to share an insight soon. They journeyed from Sukkot and camped in Etam at the edge of the desert. They journeyed from Etam and camped in Pi HaChirot, which faces Baal Tzafon, and they camped in front of Migdol. They journeyed from Pnei HaChirot, that's the same thing as Pi HaChirot, and crossed in the midst of the sea to the desert. They walked for 3 days in the desert of Etam and camped in Marah. That's when they complained about the water being bitter. They journeyed from Marah and arrived in Elim. And in Elim, there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. How lovely. And they camped there. The implication, of course, 12 springs of water, one for each tribe, 70 palm trees corresponding to the 70 elders. They journeyed from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. Of course, that's when they faced the challenge of the Egyptians that had caught up with them, pinned them against the sea. They journeyed from the Red Sea and camped in the desert of Sin, Midbar Sin. They journeyed from the desert of Sin and camped in Dafka. Love how the PH here is the F sound, Dafka. They journeyed from Dafka and camped in Alush. They journeyed from Alush and camped in Refidim, but once again, there was no water for the people to drink. They journeyed from Refidim and camped in the Sinai desert. Okay, they journeyed from the Sinai desert and camped in Kivrot HaTaiva. So that's when they complained about the meat and they got the quail and some of them died. They journeyed from Kivrot HaTaiva. By the way, Kivrot HaTaiva literally means, Kivrot means the burial. HaTaiva means of desire. So those that desired the meat, Kivrot, were buried. They journeyed from Kivrot HaTaiva and camped in Chatzerot. They journeyed from Chatzerot and camped in Ritma. Oh, hey, Shalom, say hi. You don't have to. You could. Oh, hey, Reeves.
Hi.
Hey. And Riva. Okay. You guys can grab food. Yeah, it's a microphone. Okay. Next. Okay, go. Shalom's your chef. Right here. Okay, they journeyed from Ritma. They journeyed from Ritma and they camped in Rimon Paretz. They journeyed from Rimon Paretz and camped in Livna. They journeyed from Livna, camped in Risa. They journeyed from Risa and camped in Kehelata. They journeyed from Kehelata and camped in Mount Shafer. They journeyed from Mount Shafer and camped in Charada. They journeyed from Charada and camped in Makhelot. Wow, a lot of journeys. They journeyed from Makhelot and camped in Tachat. They journeyed from Tachat and camped in Tarach. They journeyed from Tarach and camped in Mitka. They journeyed from Mitka and camped in Chashmona. They journeyed from Chashmona and camped in Moserot. They journeyed from Moserot and camped in Bnei Yakon. By the way, most of these places, we don't know what happened. Over the 40 years of journeying, we know a handful, certainly, but we don't know all the places. We don't know stories and incidents. I guess there was nondescript, or at least for us, no lessons to be drawn for our lives. Okay. They journeyed from Bnei Yakon and camped in Chor HaGidgad. They journeyed from Chor HaGidgad and camped in Yatvasa. They journeyed from Yatvasa and camped in Avrona. They journeyed from Avrona and camped in Etzion Gaver. They journeyed from Etzion Gaver and camped in the desert of Tzin, which is Kadesh. Kadesh. That's big. That's Kadesh at the end of the 40 years, though. There was Kadesh before, that's where they sinned with the spies. But this is Kadesh again now in the final approach. They journeyed from Kadesh and camped at Mount Har or Har HaHar, which is at the edge of the land of Edom. This just happened, right? And Aaron the Kohen ascended Mount Har at the Lord's bidding and died there, as we read about in the previous Torah portion. On the first day, the Torah here tells us when he passed away. On the first day of the 5th month. That is Rosh Chodesh Av, right? Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. The first day of Av, which is Rosh Chodesh Av, which is this week, Friday. One second. What? No, I'll put it back. All right, so he passed away in Rosh Chodesh Av, which is this Friday, is the anniversary of his passing, in the 40th year of the children of Israel's exodus from Egypt. So yeah, that was just recent as Moses is recounting these journeys, or the Torah is recounting these journeys. This was something that happened very recently, of course. Aaron was 123 years old when he died at Mount Har. Okay, right? Because Moses was 120 when he died. He died the same year, so he was 123, he was 3 years older. Miriam, by the way, was 126. So when she passed away, so she was 126, 123, and 120. The Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the south, in the land of Canaan, heard that the children of Israel had arrived. That's when he started up. He started fighting after Aaron's passing, and the clouds of glory, as we discussed a few weeks ago, clouds of glory dissipated. They journeyed from Mount Har and camped in Salmona. They journeyed from Salmona and camped in Funan. They journeyed from Funan and camped in Ovot. They journeyed from Ovot and camped at the ruins of Abarim on the Moabite boundary. They journeyed from the ruins and camped in Dibon Gad. They journeyed from Dibon Gad and camped in Almon Divla-Saima, or Divla-Taima. They journeyed from Almon Divla-Taima and camped in the mountains of Abarim, Hareha Avarim, in front of Nebo. They journeyed from the mountains of Abarim and camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. They camped along the Jordan from Bet Yeshimo to Avel Shittim in the plains of Moab, and that's where they were, in the plains of Moab, right by the Jordan, at Jericho, right across or at the border of the land of Israel. All told, and it's hard to keep track with the verse numbers, there were 42 journeys, 42 stops along the way. Let's do Rashi, and then I want to share a few ideas. But first, Rashi. Okay, let's see what we got here. These are the journeys. Rashi asked the obvious question: why were these journeys recorded? Like, what's the lesson? Okay, so now we know all the names. 42 journeys. Okay, why? Rashi, to inform us of the kind deeds of the omnipresent of Hashem. For although God issued a decree to move them around from place to place and to make them wander in the desert, you should not say that they were moving about and wandering from station to station for all 40 years, and they had no rest. Because, here's why. In other words, Rashi's saying, based on the recording of all the journeys, what emerges is that for most of the 40 years, they didn't move. God didn't drive them crazy. Why? Because all told, as I just mentioned, there are only 42 stages. Only 42 journeys, segments. Now deduct 14 of them, because the first 14, they all took place in the first year, before the decree. From when they journeyed from Ramses, until they arrived in Ritma, from where the spies were sent. As it says, the people journeyed from Chatzera and camped in the desert of Paran. Send for yourself men. And here it says they journeyed from Chatzera and camped at Ritma, teaching us that Ritma was in the desert of Paran. Okay, that's just a proof text. The point is that the first 14 journeys were all done in the first year, before the decree of 40 years of wandering was even specified. Subtract a further 8 stages, which took place after Aaron's death from Mount Har to the plains of Moab during the 40th year. Now, I think we talked about this. After Aaron passed away and Amalek attacked, the people felt a little disheartened. Because they were also journeying in a roundabout way at that time. And so there were some tribes. Of course we discussed this. Yes, we discussed this because there was another Rashi that talked about why the count, you only had 65 families when originally there were 70 families. And we said because some of the families were killed when the Levites were chasing tribes that were fleeing because they panicked after Aaron passed away, and they were circling and they thought, oh no, here we go again. And so they're like, all right, we're going our own way. So people traveled 8 steps back after Aaron passed away. So subtract the further. No, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm making this too complicated. No, scratch. That's true. What I said is true, but that's not what Rashi's saying. He's not saying the backtracking ones. He's saying subtract the further 8 stages, which took place after Aaron's death, from Mount Har to the plains of Moab during the 40th year. Sorry, he's talking about straight up from when Aaron passed away to when they got to the border. That was another, as we saw, is another 8 steps. That's forward, not backwards. So again, all that I said was accurate, but discard that. 8 steps from Aaron's passing in the 40th year to to knocking on the doorstep of Israel. So 14 plus 8 is already 22. So you will find that throughout the 30 years, so 42 journeys in total, 14 in the first year, 8 in the last year. So that means that throughout the 38 years, they made only 20 journeys. 14 plus 8, and take that away from 42. 22, take away from that, take away from 42, 22, you have 20 left. So over 38 years, minus first year and last year, they only went 20 stops over 40 years, over 38 years. I found this in the commentary of Moshe Darshan, the preacher. Tanchum explains it another way. It is analogous to a king. So that's one reason why we're told what the journeys were, so that we should deduce from this that God was very kind. 38 years of wandering, and they only went to 20 different places. The Tanchuma gives another explanation of why we're told all the journeys. It is analogous to a king whose son became sick. So he took him to a faraway place to have him healed. On his way back, the father began citing all the stages of their journey, saying to him, this is where we sat, here we were cold, here you had a headache, etc. So as the journey finishes, we get nostalgic. Oh, there we went to there, and we went to there. So kind of recounting the nostalgia of the journey when things are pretty much done. The Egyptians were busy, occupied with their mourning. By the way, there's an amazing talk or insight of the Rabbi on this, Tanchuma. You know, why is it that it used the example of a king and his son who's sick, and he has him healed, and on the way back, they began mentioning all the names. In this case, they didn't go back. They just traveled one way, and they were at the end of the journey. In the example, they were going back. They were retracing the journey. And why sad and cold and headache? Why these specific recollections of the nostalgia of the journey? The Rebbe has a beautiful talk on this and insight, explaining this in detail. The details of which escape me in the moment, but it's I know there's something really beautiful on this. All right, let's continue. Egyptians were busy burying, occupied with their mourning after the 10th plague. There's not a lot of Rashi on some of these journeys. Ritma was really the place where they sent the spies. Ritma was so named because of the slander of the spies, for it says, what can he give you and what can he add to you, you deceitful tongue? Sharpen arrows of a mighty man with coals of brooms, and brooms are risamim, or ritamim, ritamim, brooms, coals of brooms, and it's talking about deceitful tongue. So what place is Ritma? It's a place of deceitful speech, which was the place where the spies were dispatched and came back to. And again, not a lot of Rashi here. At the Lord's bidding, Aaron passed away at the Lord's bidding. Literally, al pi Hashem, by the mouth of the Lord. This teaches us that he died by a divine kiss. Divine kiss, I think we talked about this before. Divine kiss, obviously, is not anthropomorphic. It's not meant to be taken literally, and it's conceptual. It means a very seamless and painless uncoupling of soul from body, where it just gently separates and goes its own way. Which of course is a peaceful death. The Canaanite heard this to teach you that it was the news of Aaron's death that he heard. And we talked about this before in a previous class, even a Torah class, for the clouds of glory had withdrawn, and he thought, the Canaanite king of Arad, which is really Amalek, but whatever, he thought that permission had been granted to wage war against Israel. That is why scripture repeats it here, just to emphasize that it was because of Aaron's death that the Canaanite king attacked because he saw the clouds of glory. We explained a few weeks ago in Torah studies that there were two clouds, or two sets of clouds. One cloud of actual protection, the other one, which was a sign of, divine hanging out with the people. So when the not the protective clouds, but the clouds indicating divine presence had dissipated, had melted away, so they thought, all right, so God's no longer with them, let's attack. The ruins of Abarim, it's an expression denoting waste and ruins, as into a heap in the field. They've turned Jerusalem into heaps. And finally, from Bet Yeshimot to Avel Shittim, this teaches you that the extent of Israel's camp was 12 mil, a mil equaling approximately 3,500 feet. The Rabbi Baruch Hana said, I myself saw that place, and it is 3 parasangs, 12 mil square. Okay, if these numbers are accurate, and I'm not vouching necessarily for this accuracy, 3,500 each mil times 12 mil, okay, equals 42. Let me try that again. 3,500 square feet times 12 equals 42,000 square feet. Okay, 42,000 square feet. That was the encampment of the people. For some reason, to me, that sounds like it's not enough space. Nonetheless, that's the number that we have here. All right, Avel Shittim, the plain of Shittim was called Avel. That was its name. All right, I want to clarify, I want to throw in a few ideas here. Number one, who was it? The Maggid of Mizrich? I think it's the Maggid. So the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Chassidic movement. His primary student was the Maggid of Mizrich. And then the Maggid had many students. All the Chassidic groups come from the Maggid of Mizrich, his students, including Chabad. The Alter Rebbe was a student of the Maggid. The Maggid said the following. Maggid says that these 12, Matot-Masei B'nai Yisrael, these are the journeys. These 42 journeys are the same journeys that every human being has in their lifetime. From birth until death, which means birth would be like the Exodus, like the birth, the emerging out of a place of constraint. Mitzrayim, means a place of constraints. The birth into the promised land. Eretz HaChaim, the land of life, land of the living, which is really a euphemism also for death. So that is the journey of life. And everyone's life has these 42 journeys in their own way. The Rebbe asks on this, one second. Some of these journeys were not good. Some of these ended in disaster, plagues and punishments and complaints and all that stuff. And so he explains, the Rebbe explains that yes. So the question is, does that mean that we're all fated to fail? Not necessarily. We're fated to be challenged. How we respond to the challenge, of course, is our own choice. But we know for sure that we're fated. Life is not going to be a smooth and simple journey. There will be ups and downs like these 42 journeys. Sometimes it was great. We got the Torah at Sinai, and sometimes we were faced with an Egyptian army attacking. Sometimes there was no food and water. Sometimes there was a snake attack, right? You never know what's around the corner. Life also has this way of surprising us. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's challenging. We're not necessarily destined to fail. We're destined to be challenged. What we do in the face of the challenge, that's up to us. That's one insight. Second insight is, and this I'm going to share the screen once again. It says these are the journeys of the children of Israel, Asher Yatzu Me'eretz Mitzrayim, that left Egypt. In other words, these are the journeys of Israel leaving Egypt. And the Rebbe asks, it's asked in the Chassidic books, 1 second. How many journeys did they take to leave Egypt? 1, not 42. These were the journeys that they took in the desert or until Israel. These are not the journeys of leaving Egypt. The leaving Egypt journey was just the first one. And so Chassidus explains, the Rebbe explains that no, not true. Yes, the physical land of Egypt is only the first journey, or leaving the physical land of Egypt is only journey number 1. But all the journeys represent leaving Egypt because, again, Egypt means in Hebrew Meitzar. Mitzrayim or Meitzarim. Mitzrayim, Meitzarim, which means constraints, narrow places. And the message here is like this. We all find ourselves in limitation, some sort of limitation. It could be holy, a state of holiness, but holiness also has limitations. Even if we're doing all the spiritual things that we need to do, there's still, we still have a level that we're doing it at. And that constitutes our current limitation. And so the message is, no matter what limitation you're in, break out of it. And then tomorrow, break out of that. And then the next day, break out of that. So all of the journeys, all of the ascents, all of the steps are all really leaving Egypt. Egypt is not a the Exodus is not a one-time deal. It's like, I was struggling with something and then I'm no longer struggling with it. It's not true. You might not be struggling with that, but you're struggling with something. And even struggling with contentedness or contentment of having arrived, that itself is its own challenge. The sense of, I've accomplished. Anyway, so the point is, we're always growing, we're always striving, we're always journeying out of Egypt. And if we got out of Egypt yesterday, great. All that means is we have another Exodus to achieve today. All right. Thanks for joining. It's great to see you. Tomorrow we are back on. Tonight we have Torah studies. Topic is chosen and holy, the chosen nation. What does that mean? And then, of course, that's at 7:30 on Zoom. And then we're back on tomorrow. Okay. Great to see you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. All right. Have a great day. See you a little bit later.
You as well.
Okay.
Ciao.
Bye.